So, welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are unpacking something that is, honestly, it's the absolute definition of a biological ambush.
Oh, absolutely. It's the silent killer scenario.
Right. You feel totally fine right up until the exact second you don't. And that is the paradox we are forensically unpacking for you today.
Yeah, and we have an incredible source for this. We're looking at the personal records of Osman, who is known online as the blind Muslim yogi.
Yeah, and I want to set the stage immediately for you listening because this is wild. We are looking at a guy who suffered a catastrophic failure of his cardiovascular system. I mean, 3 major heart attacks.
3 of them. And the third one was utterly debilitating.
Utterly debilitating, and yet somehow he avoided open heart surgery using an intervention that is so simple, it almost defies modern medical conditioning.
It really is the ultimate testament to the body's, latent evolutionary mechanics.
Yeah.
What Osman achieved over the last 20 years, it forces us to just completely reevaluate the threshold between a lifestyle intervention and clinical necessity.
Exactly. We're talking about severe myocardial infarction, tissue death in the heart. And it was rehabilitated through this incredibly precise, almost like microscopic behavioral engineering.
Yeah, but before we get into the physical mechanics of the recovery, I think we really need to frame who Osman actually is.
Oh, for sure. Because his background makes those initial heart attacks incredibly confusing. Like it's a massive paradox.
Right, because Osman has been practicing yoga and meditation on a highly advanced, rigorous level for 50 years.
50 years. And when we say rigorous, I mean there were periods of his life where he was practicing up to 18 hours a day.
Which is just staggering to think about.
It is. He actually attained his first experience of samadhi when he was only 19 years old.
And for those listening who might not know, samadhi is this profound state of meditative consciousness, like total spiritual absorption.
Right. Plus, he studied extensively across all these different schools of thought. The Far East, the Middle East, the West. He's a master-level bioenergy healer, specializing in critical care and terminal illnesses.
Utilizing principles of quantum entanglement and telepathic healing, no less.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this resume, right? Looking at a man who is deeply rooted in the teachings of Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, the works of Swami Sivananda, Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna.
We're absolute titans of spiritual discipline.
Exactly. And I am completely stuck because I always assumed that kind of deep tissue spiritual practice made you basically bulletproof to stress.
Yeah, that's the common assumption, isn't it?
Right. So how does a man with that level of inner engineering suffer 3 heart attacks?
Well, that is the perfect question.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why his case is such a masterclass in human physiology. You're looking at the spiritual side of his life, which is vast, obviously.
But there's another side to the coin.
Exactly. The other side is that Osman has been an entrepreneur, like deep in the trenches of self-employment for over 3 decades.
Ah, right. The business world.
Yeah, and he explicitly diagnosed his own condition in his transcripts. The silent assassin wasn't his diet, it wasn't a lack of physical activity, and it certainly wasn't a lack of spiritual grounding.
It was occupational stress.
Extreme, unrelenting, chronic occupational stress.
Okay, but I need to push back on that a little bit because, I always thought stress just meant you felt a bit anxious, like maybe your shoulders get tight, maybe you toss and turn at night.
Yeah, right, the casual definition of stress.
Yeah, but you're telling me his brain literally couldn't tell the difference between a late invoice and a physical predator? Like, how does the emotion of running a business turn into physical arterial damage that stops a heart?
Oh, it's all about the hierarchy of the autonomic nervous system. Let's break down the exact biological mechanism here, because it is terrifyingly efficient.
Please do, because I think a lot of people listening are dealing with exactly this kind of stress.
Okay, so think of your autonomic nervous system as having 2 primary gears. The parasympathetic gear is your rest and digest mode.
Which is where the yoga comes in.
Exactly. This is where Osman's deep meditative practices live. His resonance with the teachings of people like Gopi Krishna and Dr. Bonnie Greenwell on energetic awakenings, all of that lowers your heart rate, dilates your blood vessels, and promotes cellular repair.
Okay, so that's the healing gear, but then you have the sympathetic nervous system.
Right, the fight or flight gear.
And running a business for 30 years is basically, what, holding a brick down on the gas pedal of that sympathetic gear?
You nailed it. When you are an entrepreneur managing cash flow, dealing with market collapse, handling employees, your amygdala doesn't know what economics is.
The fear center of the brain?
Right. It only knows threat. So it signals the adrenal glands to dump massive amounts of cortisol and epinephrine into your bloodstream.
Which is great if you're running from a literal tiger.
Exactly. Epinephrine spikes your heart rate to pump oxygen to your legs. Cortisol floods your blood with glucose for instant energy.
Wow.
And crucially, your blood vessels constrict, and your blood literally thickens with clotting factors. So the tiger claws you, you don't bleed to death.
Wait, really? The blood actually thickens. So his body was physically preparing for a horrific wound every single day for 30 years.
Yes, every single day.
That's like running a city's water pumps at 200% pressure 24/7. Eventually, the pipes are just going to burst.
That is exactly what happens on a microscopic level. It's a condition called endothelial dysfunction. The inner lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, is only one cell thick.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly fragile.
It is. And when you run high blood pressure through those vessels constantly, the sheer mechanical force acts like sandpaper. It creates microscopic tears in the vascular wall.
And let me guess, the body tries to patch those tears, and that's where the trouble really starts.
Precisely. The immune system detects the tears and sends in white blood cells called macrophages to fix the damage. But because the blood is also flooded with stress-induced cholesterol and glucose.
Because of the cortisol.
Right. Because of the cortisol, those macrophages gorge themselves on the lipids. They turn into these toxic inflammatory entities known as foam cells.
Foam cells? That sounds awful.
They are. These foam cells embed themselves directly into the artery wall, creating a fatty streak, which eventually hardens into a calcified plaque.
Narrowing the artery.
Exactly. And one day, under a spike of stress, that plaque ruptures. A blood clot forms instantly to seal the rupture, blocking the artery completely. The heart muscle downstream is starved of oxygen, and within minutes, the tissue begins to die.
And that is a myocardial infarction.
That is a heart attack.
Man, it is so illuminating to hear it described mechanically like that. It completely strips away the mystery. Like, it proves that no amount of lotus position or deep breathing can completely insulate the human body if the sympathetic nervous system is just trapped in overdrive.
Yeah, you can't out-meditate a biological crisis of that magnitude if the stress trigger is constant.
Actually, listening to Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, specifically that episode with Simon Sinek on the invisible burdens of leadership, you hear exactly this. Sinek talks about how the biological cost of leadership is a literal drain on our physiological resources.
Oh, absolutely. Or if you listen to Mo Gaudat on that same podcast, dissecting the formula for happiness and stress, it always comes back to cortisol toxicity.
It always does, and Osman himself is incredibly blunt in the transcript about this. He says of entrepreneurial stress, and I quote, "I would not recommend it to even my enemy."
That quote is chilling, especially coming from someone with his level of spiritual fortitude.
Right, and it echoes what we hear on the Huberman Lab podcast when Professor Andrew Huberman brings on Dr. Robert Sapolsky.
Oh, the author of Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Yes. Sapolsky outlines exactly what we just discussed. Animals only experience acute stress, like 3 minutes of terror on the savannah. Humans are the only species that can generate chronic toxic stress purely through thought.
We can literally think our way into a heart attack.
We really can. Which brings us to the aftermath of that third heart attack. The doctor's immediate prescription was a referral to a cardiologist for open heart surgery.
A coronary artery bypass graft or a CAB.
Right. But Osman resisted. And what fascinated me was that his resistance wasn't rooted in, like, a denial of science. He acknowledges that surgery saves lives.
So what was the hesitation?
Well, he was deeply influenced by the anecdotal evidence of his friends. They warned him that post-surgery, you become basically 50% the man or woman you used to be.
Ah, I see.
They told him that the simple ability to just stand up, full of energy, and move freely, it just vanishes. You have to do everything slowly.
We really have to validate that fear because it is clinically grounded. A bypass surgery is a marvel of modern medicine, but it is also one of the most violently invasive procedures a human body can undergo.
I mean, they literally saw through your sternum.
They do. They saw through your sternum, they spread your rib cage wide open, they stop your heart from beating, and put you on a cardiopulmonary bypass machine.
A heart-lung machine.
Right. It mechanically pumps and oxygenates your blood while the surgeon grafts a new vein onto your heart.
Just hearing that triggers my own fight-or-flight response. The loss of bodily autonomy is just staggering.
It is profound trauma. And the aftermath is not just physical, it's deeply neurological and psychological. When Osman's friends say they feel like 50% of who they were, they're often referring to something called pump head.
Pump head? What is that?
It's a colloquial medical term for post-perfusion syndrome. A lot of patients experience it after being on a bypass machine. It involves cognitive decline, memory issues, and this deep chronic fatigue.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, your body has experienced the ultimate trauma. The psychological shift of knowing your chest was cracked open creates a profound vulnerability. It actually reminds me of the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes,
Oh, yeah, I love that show.
particularly his interviews with Dr. Joe Dispenza. They discuss how physical trauma traps the body in the past. Your nervous system remembers the violation of the surgery, and it literally downregulates your available energy to keep you safe and guarded.
Which aligns perfectly with the Mel Robbins podcast, too. Mel frequently talks about nervous system regulation and how physical shocks to the body create a psychological blueprint of fear.
Exactly. If you wake up every day terrified to move too fast because your sternum was wired back together, your world just shrinks.
And Osman was staring down the barrel of surviving, but absolutely losing the essence of how he lived. But here is the critical pivot. He realized he had a tiny window. It wasn't an acute drop-dead that afternoon emergency.
He had a moment to breathe.
He did. So he made a compromise with the doctors to dedicate a few weeks to a natural method first.
And that window of time is everything. It allowed him to run a controlled, intense experiment on his own biology.
And I really want to get into the specific mechanics of that experiment, the protocol, what I am affectionately calling the miracle of the morning walk.
That's a great name for it.
Thanks. But before we do, I need to make a quick but super vital contextual note for you listening. Osman mentions in his current writings and videos some incredibly vivid visual details. Like, he talks about the plants, the sky, the traffic.
Right.
It's so important to know that Osman, the blind Muslim yogi, went permanently blind quite recently, in May 2023. So whenever he describes these visual details in his recovery, he is drawing on a rich lifetime of having normal eyesight up until that point.
He's using decades of visual memories to paint these concepts for us.
Exactly. Which honestly adds a whole other layer of depth to his mindfulness practices, don't you think? He's visualizing his healing.
Absolutely. The mind's eye becomes incredibly powerful.
So let's break down this walking protocol, because when people hear natural healing, they usually think of something complex, but this was literally just walking. However, it had incredibly strict, non-negotiable boundaries.
The parameters were everything.
First was the duration. He had a minimum of 20 minutes, but a hard maximum of 40 minutes per day. Now, the minimum I get. But why cap it? If 40 minutes is good, isn't 60 minutes better?
Oh, definitely not when your myocardium, your heart muscle, has just survived a necrotic event.
Necrotic meaning tissue death.
Right. During his heart attacks, parts of his heart tissue literally died from lack of oxygen. The surrounding tissue is deeply inflamed, it's bruised, and it's structurally compromised. The heart undergoes a process called ventricular remodeling, where it tries to scar over the dead tissue and compensate.
So it's basically working with a cracked foundation.
Exactly. If you push a compromised heart past 40 minutes, you are no longer rehabilitating it. You are demanding an output it cannot safely provide.
You could break it again.
Exactly. The sheer mechanical fatigue of the muscle wall could induce an arrhythmia or trigger another ischemic event. The 40-minute cap was a firewall against his own ambition.
And that ambition had to be curtailed by the second rule, too, the pacing. Osman didn't have a smartwatch with a biometric chest strap back then, so his doctor gave him the talk test.
The talk test is brilliant.
It is. He had to walk fast enough to be slightly out of breath, but slow enough that he could carry on a phone conversation without suffocating.
That is one of the most elegant clinical heuristics ever designed. What the doctor was doing was ensuring Osman stayed in a very specific cardiovascular state, specifically around 120 beats per minute.
Okay. I know that Joe Rogan Experience has done massive deep dives into this exact concept, particularly in his episodes with Dr. Peter Attia. They talk endlessly about the magic of Zone 2 cardio. Is that what we're talking about here?
It maps almost perfectly to Zone 2. In Zone 2, which generally hovers around that 120 to 130 BPM mark, depending on your age, your body is relying almost entirely on mitochondrial function to oxidize fat for fuel rather than burning glycogen.
Well, it's very efficient.
Very. But crucially for Osman, 120 BPM is the ultimate safe zone for a cardiac patient. A normal resting heart rate is around 72 BPM. If you push into high-intensity interval training, you might hit 160 or 170 BPM.
Which would be disastrous for him.
At 160 BPM, the sheer velocity of the blood and the forceful contractions of the left ventricle place massive stress on the arterial walls and the heart muscle. Osman's heart would have failed under that load.
So it's the Goldilocks principle. Not too cold where the heart doesn't have to adapt, but not too hot where the engine just blows a gasket.
Right. And finding that exact ventilatory threshold without a heart rate monitor is just brilliant. The moment you cannot speak in a full sentence means your body has crossed the aerobic threshold. You are no longer bringing in enough oxygen to meet the energy demand, and you are starting to produce lactate.
The talk test kept him purely aerobic.
Yes, strictly aerobic.
But maintaining that discipline seems incredibly difficult, especially for an aggressive entrepreneur who's used to just, pushing through walls. And this is where Osman deployed a psychological hack that I absolutely love.
The turning around trick.
Yes. To ensure he never broke the 40-minute rule,
Yeah.
he didn't map out some complex loop, and he didn't stare at a watch on a treadmill. He literally just walked in any direction away from his house for exactly 20 minutes. And the second he hit the 20-minute mark, he simply turned around and walked back.
It is a phenomenal piece of behavioral engineering.
It completely hacks the brain's resistance. It reminds me of the Mel Robbins podcast, specifically her episodes on willpower and habit building. You only have to motivate yourself for the first 20 minutes.
Right, because the journey back requires zero willpower. It just requires you to get home.
Exactly. It removes all cognitive load.
And we have to remember that cognitive load is a form of stress. By removing the need to navigate or plan, he kept his sympathetic nervous system completely quiet during the exercise.
That is so smart.
But the mechanics of the walk are really only half the equation. The other half, which might be even more biologically profound, is the timing.
The chronobiology of exercise. Because Osman's doctor gave him an absolute mandate. He had to walk at the very beginning of the day, right at sunrise, as the sky was just starting to lighten.
Yes, the sunrise is key.
And the doctor made an incredibly bold claim. He told Osman that 20 minutes of morning walking is superior to 2 hours of heavy gym exercise in the afternoon. I really need you to break down the metabolic math on that, because that completely flies in the face of modern hustle culture.
It sounds less hyperbole, doesn't it? But it's deeply anchored in evolutionary biology and circadian science. When you walk first thing in the morning, especially outside as the sun is rising, you are doing two things simultaneously.
Okay, what's the first?
First, you are gently elevating your basal metabolic rate. But more importantly, you are maintaining that elevated burn rate throughout the entire rest of the day.
So you're basically keeping the furnace stoked all day long.
Exactly. You are cashing in on a 20-minute metabolic tailwind for the next 12 to 14 hours because you remain awake and active.
Okay, I see. Now contrast that with the heavy 2-hour evening workout.
Right. So you crush a session at 7 p.m., your metabolic rate skyrockets, your core temperature is high, but then a few hours later, you go to sleep.
And sleep changes everything.
Sleep is the body's ultimate biological brake pedal. Your heart rate drops, your temperature plummets, your metabolism shifts into its lowest gear for cellular repair. By going to sleep, you effectively truncate and cancel out the metabolic afterburn you work so hard for in the gym.
Wow. That completely flips the script. But there's more to the sunrise than just metabolism, right? We have to talk about the light itself.
Absolutely. This is where we look at the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. When you step outside at dawn, the specific angle of the sun delivers a unique spectrum of blue and yellow light.
The lux intensity.
Yes. This light hits the melanopsin ganglion cells in your retina, which send an electrical signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, your master clock.
Okay, I know Professor Andrew Huberman talks about this incessantly on the Huberman Lab podcast. He had Dr. Seema Hadar on to discuss exactly how this morning light pulse sets the timer for your entire nervous system.
Yeah, Huberman is the great modern evangelist of this exact mechanism. When that master clock receives the sunrise signal, it triggers a healthy, natural spike of cortisol.
A healthy spike, not the chronic stress kind.
Exactly. This wakes you up. It clears out adenosine, which is the chemical that makes you sleepy. And most importantly, it sets a biological timer. Exactly 12 to 14 hours after that morning light exposure, your pineal gland will start producing melatonin, allowing you to achieve deep, restorative sleep.
So by walking at sunrise, Osman wasn't just fixing his heart, he was fixing his sleep architecture.
He was rewiring his entire circadian rhythm.
And if poor sleep was contributing to his entrepreneurial stress, he was basically disarming the bomb at its source. It reminds me of the School of Greatness episode with Robin Sharma, the author of The 5 a.m. Club.
Oh, yeah.
Sharma talks about the magic of the morning for psychological victory, but here we see the hard, undeniable endocrinology backing it up.
And conversely, if you do that heavy 2-hour workout late at night under bright gym lights, you spike cortisol when it should be at its absolute lowest.
Which completely suppresses your melatonin.
You ruin your sleep,
Yeah.
which raises your baseline inflammation, which directly damages the heart. The doctor's advice wasn't just about calories, it was about hormonal alignment.
That is mind-blowing. But of course, you cannot outwalk a toxic diet, even if you walk at the perfect hormonal hour. Which naturally brings us to how Osman fueled his body during this critical recovery window.
Diet is the foundation.
Right. Because if his metabolism is running hotter all day, he must have been incredibly hungry. How does an exhausted heart patient feed a newly active metabolism without triggering the exact systemic inflammation that caused the blockages in the first place? Did he jump on some crazy restrictive calorie counting app?
He did the exact opposite, which is really the hallmark of sustainable behavioral change. He used a purely subtractive method.
I love the subtractive method. It is so elegant. He didn't add complex macros or weigh his food down to the gram. He simply looked at his diet and subtracted the harmful snacks.
Got the junk.
Yeah, he completely eliminated cakes, biscuits, chips, crisps, and fast food. He just cut the ultra-processed stuff. And he coupled that with what I call the plate rule.
The plate rule is a psychological masterstroke.
It really is. Osman decided he was only going to eat natural food, and he was only going to eat it if it was served on a plate. If you wanted to snack, he snacked on actual whole food items, not things ripped out of crinkly, multi-layered plastic bags.
That physical boundary of the plate is huge.
And here is the kicker. He never counted a single calorie. He just made sure not to consume more than what was on his initially loaded plate. He could pile that plate to the ceiling if he wanted, but once the plate was clean, the meal was over.
This is where we have to look at the endocrinology of satiety. Why does this work biologically?
Well, I was thrilled to see the specific example he gave in his transcript to prove he wasn't starving himself. Osman has a healthy appetite. He talks about going to a restaurant and ordering a massive vegan bowl.
But he doesn't stop there.
No, he excitedly adds extra walnuts, extra cashews, massive scoops of guacamole, hummus, and extra falafel. That is a very dense, heavy, fat-rich meal.
And that is exactly why he succeeded. He was loading up on high-satiety, nutrient-dense whole foods. Walnuts, cashews, and avocados are packed with monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, as well as massive amounts of dietary fiber.
Which does what to the gut?
When you consume these natural fats and fibers, your gut physically stretches and it releases a cascade of hormones, specifically leptin, cholecystokinin or CCK, and peptide YY.
These are the biological text messages to the brain saying, hey, we are full, shut down the hunger drive.
Precisely. They cross the blood-brain barrier and hit the hypothalamus, turning off the urge to eat. And because whole foods take hours to break down, that satiety signal lasts.
Contrast this with the ultra-processed foods he subtracted. Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO had a phenomenal episode with the biochemist Jessie Inchaspe, the glucose goddess, where they broke this down.
Oh, her work on glucose spikes is fantastic.
It is. She explains how ultra-processed chips and cakes are engineered to bypass your satiety hormones. They hit the bliss point of salt, sugar, and fat, creating an instant dopamine spike in the brain, accompanied by a massive spike in blood glucose.
And then the glucose crashes, and you are starving again an hour later, despite having eaten 1,000 calories.
Exactly. Furthermore, those massive glucose spikes trigger huge releases of insulin, which, in a state of chronic stress, drives visceral fat storage and systemic inflammation.
Which is awful for the heart. Dr. Rhonda Patrick has discussed this at length on the Joe Rogan Experience, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she talks about how the micronutrient void in ultra-processed food literally starves your cells while making you obese, fueling the exact endothelial dysfunction that caused Osman's heart attacks. By sticking to the vegan bowl with whole food fats, Osman achieved total satiety without the inflammatory insulin roller coaster.
Psychologically, the plate rule gave him permission to eat abundantly. It reminds me of the Ranveer Show Beer Biceps podcast, when Ranveer speaks with lifestyle medicine experts like Luke Coutinho.
Right.
The message is always about bio-individuality and removing the mental prison of deprivation. Osman never felt restricted. He just completely changed the quality of his abundance.
And the physical return on investment was staggering and immediate.
Let's look at that timeline for you listening. Within just 6 months of implementing the morning sunrise walk and the subtractive plate rule, Osman lost over 20 kilograms.
That is approximately 44 pounds.
In 6 months, without counting calories or running marathons.
We have to contextualize what 44 pounds means to a damaged heart. Every single pound of fat requires miles of microscopic blood vessels to sustain it.
Wow, miles.
Miles. The heart has to work against peripheral resistance to pump blood through all those extra miles of tubing. Dropping 44 pounds is like taking a massive, suffocating weighted vest off an engine that was already sputtering.
And the medical victory was absolute. His doctor evaluated his blood work and took him off his cholesterol medications completely.
His natural lifestyle had completely superseded the need for pharmaceutical intervention.
But his journey didn't stop there. This is where we have to look at the 20-year horizon.
Because the body is an ultimate adaptation machine.
Exactly. Osman didn't just remain a 40-minute walker. Over the next 2 decades, his heart grew so resilient and his cardiovascular infrastructure rebuilt itself so thoroughly that he began a systematic progression.
He scaled up.
He did. He moved from the walk to bodyweight fitness. From there, he progressed to the gym using weighted machines. And finally, his heart became so undeniably strong that he transitioned to heavy free weight strength training. A man who was told he needed his sternum sawed in half to survive is now throwing around free weights.
It is the perfect application of progressive overload, executed over a macro timescale. He gave his myocardium the exact right amount of stress at the exact right time, allowing it to adapt, heal the necrosis, and rebuild stronger year after year.
And beyond the physical muscles and the arteries, Osman noted profound holistic benefits that you simply cannot get inside a fluorescent-lit gym. Walking outside exposed him to the elements.
Nature therapy.
Yeah, he talked about feeling the sunshine, seeing the trees, hearing the rhythm of the traffic again, drawing on his deep visual memories from before he went blind. It instilled a deep, unshakable positivity to start his day.
In environmental psychology, we call that the biophilia hypothesis. Humans have an innate evolutionary need to connect with natural systems. Time spent in nature actively lowers cortisol and sympathetic nervous system tone.
It acts as a direct antagonist to the entrepreneurial stress that almost killed him. It reminds me of the Soul Boom podcast with Rainn Wilson.
Oh, I caught that one.
Yeah. Rainn had Arthur Brooks on to discuss the science of happiness, and a core tenet is stripping away the artificial complexities of modern life to find awe in the natural world. Or Reza Aslan talking about how spirituality must be integrated into our physical reality. Osman's walk became a moving meditation.
Which perfectly bridges the gap between his physical recovery and his lifelong identity as a healer and yogi.
Yes, we absolutely must dive deeper into that, because Osman is not just a heart attack survivor. He is a master-level bioenergy healer. He has practiced yoga and meditation for 50 years.
A true master.
And this isn't just casual weekend stretching, you know. We are talking about a man who attained samadhi at 19 years old. For our listeners who might not be familiar with that term, samadhi is considered the pinnacle of yogic achievement in the 8 limbs of yoga outlined by Patanjali. It is a state of profound, non-dualistic consciousness where the illusion of separation dissolves.
To achieve that at 19 requires a staggering level of neurological and spiritual dedication. We see these concepts deeply explored on the Buddha at the Gas Pump podcast with Rick Archer.
Oh, Rick Archer's interviews are incredible.
They really are. He frequently interviews people who have undergone profound shifts in consciousness. For instance, his interviews with Adyashanti on the nature of awakening, or Swami Sarvapriyananda on the deeply intellectual framework of Vedanta. They explore how these ancient practices radically rewire the brain's default mode network.
And Osman studied the works of the absolute titans of this field. We're talking Swami Vivekananda, who introduced Raja Yoga to the West. Yogananda, whose autobiography of a yogi detailed the science of Kriya Yoga.
A classic text.
And Ramakrishna, whose life was a testament to total devotional immersion. Osman was practicing these techniques for up to 18 hours a day in certain stages of his life. Even now, he practices a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day just to, as he puts it, sharpen the sword.
That volume of practice changes the fundamental energetic frequency of the body. When you read the works of Gopi Krishna or listen to clinical psychologists like Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, who is also featured on Buddha at the Gas Pump, discussing the Kundalini awakening process, you realize they are describing a literal biological upgrade of the nervous system.
The spine and the brain become conduits for a massively expanded level of life force, or prana.
Exactly.
And Osman channels that honed life force into his specialty, bioenergy healing on a master level, using the principles of quantum entanglement and telepathic healing.
Quantum entanglement is a fascinating intersection of ancient mysticism and modern physics. It's the principle that 2 particles can become inextricably linked, such that the state of one instantly influences the state of the other, regardless of the physical distance between them.
It's what Einstein called spooky action at a distance.
That's the one. And in the realm of advanced energy healing, practitioners like Osman utilize this framework. They operate on the understanding that consciousness is non-local.
Meaning it's not just confined to the skull.
Right. Therefore, healing intent, directed with the laser-like focus of someone who has practiced meditation for 50 years, can influence the energetic and physical state of a patient anywhere in the world.
Loosehouse explores this borderline between quantum physics and healing heavily on the School of Greatness with guests like Dr. Joe Dispenza, discussing how achieving brain-heart coherence allows us to interact with the quantum field.
And Osman specializes in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses. He brings a profound alternative protocol to people who are often at the end of their medical ropes.
But he is incredibly clear, and we must echo this for you listening. He offers his services on a complementary basis. It is meant to enhance what is lacking in other fields, absolutely not as a replacement for licensed medical treatment. Just as he used his doctor's strict heart rate limits to guide his walk, he respects the medical baseline.
It is the truest definition of integrative wellness. You use the allopathic medical system to stabilize the acute crisis, and you use the bioenergetic ancient sciences to facilitate deep systemic healing.
Absolutely. Now, for you listening, if you want to explore Osman's methods, his mission is to encourage a scientific, result-based, and simplified approach to these ancient sciences. He has spent his life tirelessly simplifying very complex protocols so people can actually use them to improve their health, peace of mind, and relationships.
He really breaks it down to the essentials.
He does, and he offers an incredible resource. I highly encourage you to go to his website, yogawellness786.com. On that site, he has a free 5-minute yoga and meditation program available for download.
A 5-minute program is the perfect entry point. As we saw with his 20-minute walk, the goal is to remove the barrier to entry. You don't need to start with 18 hours a day.
Exactly. Start small. He also offers expensive advice and techniques through his YouTube channel, which is completely free. He doesn't withhold any of his foundational teachings there.
That's very generous.
It is. Now, if you want to go deeper, he does have a Patreon channel where you can access paid live, daily video lessons and one-on-one consultations. And of course, his energy healing services are available. But again, to be fully transparent, due to his incredibly high success rate over 50 years and the massive 8 to 10 hours a day he spends maintaining his energetic capacity, his premium healing treatments and consultation fees are not inexpensive.
They reflect a lifetime of absolute mastery. Mastery requires sacrifice. The dedication to maintain that level of bioenergetic output is immense. We hear echoes of this discipline on the Ranveer show when Sadhguru talks about inner engineering. It requires a fundamental restructuring of your life's priorities.
It really does. Osman's life is a testament to that restructuring. From a man shattered by the invisible weight of entrepreneurial stress, facing the terrifying prospect of a bypass machine, to a master healer walking at sunrise, lifting weights, and guiding others through the quantum field.
He broke down every barrier.
He really did. His walk was free. It required zero commute. It was the ultimate democratization of health.
It forces us to step back and look at the macro picture. In our modern era, we are incessantly sold highly complex, incredibly expensive, and deeply invasive solutions to our physical and psychological problems.
We are conditioned to look for the magic pharmaceutical pill, the elite biohack, or the surgical fix.
Exactly. But Osman's story, layered with the wisdom of 50 years of practice, forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question.
What is that question?
Are we completely overlooking our body's ancient, built-in evolutionary healing mechanisms simply because walking outside in the morning sunlight and eating whole foods from a single plate doesn't have a corporate price tag attached to it?
Wow, that hits hard. If it cannot be monetized, we tend to dismiss it as ineffective. Yet the most powerful, life-saving intervention was literally right outside his front door the entire time.
It was always there.
Osman's journey proves that the profound is often disguised as the simple. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration of the biological, the psychological, and the spiritual has given you as much to ponder as it gave us. Keep asking those big questions, keep looking for the simple truths hiding in plain sight, and stay curious.